I never expected her to remember my name, let alone everything else. The laundromat smelled of detergent and wet cotton. She said it lightly, but her gaze lingered on my hands. I noticed how her fingers curled around the mug, the faint tremor when she set it on the counter. I wanted to say something clever, but I couldn't. I just nodded. Yeah, methodical. She laughed quietly, one of those small laughs that makes a place feel less fluorescent and more warm. I like that about you. Not many people notice the small things. I realized I hadn't noticed she had remembered my usual detergent brand. The little bottle I always pick tucked at the edge of the shelf. She had moved it aside for me, just so. It was absurd how that mattered, but it did. The machine's word, and for a moment the only sound was that, the mug tapping against the counter, her quiet breathing. I shifted my weight, catching her glance again. She didn't look away this time, just studied me, and I wanted to disappear into the rhythm of her gaze. Wanted to sink into the warmth of knowing she knew me. I reached for my phone, but didn't unlock it. Another unsent message hovering in drafts, waiting for some courage I didn't have. I thumbed at it anyway, like touching it might give me courage. She watched, amused, maybe bemused. You always check your phone mid-conversation, she asked. Not accusing, just observing. Habit, I muttered. My voice sounded rough to me, too low, too uncertain. I glanced at her hand again, the way she twirled her ring absent-mindedly. Small habits, tiny quirks, they were unbearable in their pull. I wanted to ask her if she wanted coffee. I didn't. Instead, I folded a napkin I hadn't used, my fingers catching the creases, tracing lines that led nowhere. She shifted, resting her mug on the dryer. I'll be heading out soon. Early shift tomorrow. I nodded, feeling the space between us stretch, a quiet chasm filled with what we weren't saying. I wanted to tell her she shouldn't leave, that the night felt smaller when she was gone. But I didn't. I just waited for her to move first. When she finally smiled again, that small, secret smile, she dropped a note on the counter. My name was written at the top. A number. And a time. I stared at it, pulse caught in my throat. The laundromat's hum felt louder suddenly, the flicker of lights sharper. I didn't move immediately. I just watched her leave, the door swinging closed behind her, and felt the quietest kind of vertigo, like the world had shifted a fraction, and only I noticed. Then I picked up the note, tracing the numbers with my finger. My thumb lingered where her handwriting curved slightly, the way she ended each line with a faint flourish. I should have thrown it away. I should have called my friend first. I should have anything. Instead, I slid it into my pocket. And that was when my phone buzzed. A text. Not from her. From my friend. Did you see my mom today? I didn't sleep well that night. My pillow smelled faintly of the laundromat, of her mug, of something I couldn't name. The note burned a hole in my pocket, and I kept feeling her eyes in my head, watching, weighing, knowing. I texted her the next evening, careful, unsure. Coffee. Just to talk. She replied almost immediately. Okay. Near the corner shop. 7 p.m. The coffee shop was warm, the smell of baked bread and brewing beans making the fluorescent laundromat fade from memory. She was already there, tucked into a booth by the window. Her hands clasped the mug, fingers tracing the rim absent-mindedly. Hi, I said, voice quieter than I expected. Hi, she returned, tilting her head as if she'd been expecting me. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes entirely. Not yet. We talked about small things at first. The weather, the shop's pastries, how long it took for coffee to cool too fast. She laughed at my jokes softly, and I noticed, really noticed, the tiny lines at the corners of her eyes, the way her shoulders relaxed when she thought no one was looking. Then she said something, not monumental, not obvious, but it lingered. My husband, we split a few years ago. It was amicable mostly. I'm just used to being quiet about it. I nodded, swallowing a lump. That explained things. Not the way I wanted it to, not entirely. But it explained the quiet sorrow I sometimes saw in her eyes, the way she moved through the world carefully, as if expecting disappointment at any turn. I stopped. I don't really know how to respond to that. Neither do I, she said. And for a moment, silence fell between us, full but not heavy. I could feel the subtle pull of her gaze, the slight hesitation in how she picked at the edge of her sleeve, and my chest tightened. We ordered another round of tea. She handed me the cup first. Our fingers brushed, just the slightest touch, and something quiet, like electricity through a winter wire, moved between us. I pretended not to notice. She pretended to. I thought about my friend, about boundaries I shouldn't cross, the absurdity of letting myself linger here. And yet, the way she laughed when I mispronounced the name of a pastry, the way her eyes followed my hands as I stirred the tea, it made the world shrink, made the air feel too warm and too small at the same time. I helped her pick up a napkin that had fluttered to the floor. My hand lingered near hers longer than necessary, just brushing the tips of her fingers. She looked at me, not pulling away, just letting the contact exist. I don't know why that moment stayed with me, I admitted quietly, stirring my tea again. Maybe because it felt like someone finally saw me. She didn't answer. She just smiled faintly, tilting her head toward the window. I could tell she was thinking of 100 small things she wouldn't say aloud. Things about herself, about me. Things she wanted to, and things she knew she shouldn't. And yet, in the soft hum of the coffee shop, in the slow curl of steam above our mugs, it felt like we were suspended in a private orbit, even if only for a few minutes. Her hand twitched toward mine again, just a fraction, like a secret she almost gave away. I didn't pull back. The next week, the apartment felt smaller. Not mine, hers, the one above my friend's. She had invited me to help hang a picture she'd been staring at for days. I told myself it was casual, just helping. But the smell of her kitchen, the faint perfume clinging to the air, made my chest tight in a way I couldn't name. She moved around slowly, barefoot, brushing against the cabinets, humming softly. I tried to focus on holding the frame straight. My hands trembled slightly. She didn't comment, didn't notice, or pretended not to. I wasn't sure which. I think this looks better a little to the left, she said. Her voice was calm, deliberate, and then she leaned closer, almost brushing my shoulder as she adjusted the frame. I felt the warmth, the soft scrape of her sleeve against mine. Sorry, I muttered. No, it's fine, she said, but her eyes lingered. And I knew she knew. I wanted to reach for her hand, to say something I couldn't form into words. But I didn't. Instead, I fiddled with the picture wire, pretending that the tiny adjustments mattered more than the heat between us. Then the doorbell rang. My friend. Too early. I froze. Her eyes met mine, sharp, almost apologetic, and she took a step back. The space between us snapped into reality. Hey, my friend said, cheerful, oblivious, stepping inside with a bag of groceries. Thought I'd drop these off before dinner. I smiled weakly, trying to look casual. She smiled too, a little tight around the edges. The invisible cord that had pulled us close recoiled. I kept noticing little things about her during that half hour. The way she poured tea, her fingers brushing the mug's rim as she handed it to me. The quick flick of her eyes when she thought I wasn't looking. Her presence was constant, quietly insistent, and I felt it pressing against something I wasn't ready to name. We sat on the couch after my friend left. I was supposed to help straighten the cushions, but I couldn't stop noticing her. She traced the edge of the throw blanket with a finger, eyes on the ceiling. I imagined leaning closer, just enough to feel her breath. Do you ever think about what could happen? I almost said it. The words sat in my throat. Instead, I shifted, fiddling with a loose thread on my sleeve. She turned, eyes catching mine. A half smile, and then she reached for her mug, brushing my fingers. Again, that same impossible warmth. We froze, closer than we'd ever been. Her lips, I caught the hint of them, seemed like they might curve toward mine if I just leaned. My heart jerked. I imagined it, just imagined it. And then she looked away, pretending to sip the tea. I wanted to say it, wanted to confess that the note, the late-night coffees, the stolen glances had changed everything. But I didn't. Her hand lingered near mine on the table. Nothing more. But in that small pause, that nearly touch, I felt everything. And I realized I was waiting. Waiting for a sign that she wanted the same. Waiting for her to make the next move. And maybe, silently, waiting for her to stop herself. The park was empty except for the occasional jogger and a dog tugging at its leash. Twilight had settled over the benches, turning the paths into muted shadows. I walked beside her, hands in my pockets, trying to pretend the air wasn't heavy with something we hadn't named. She stopped near a fountain, tossing a pebble into the water. I stayed a few steps back, watching her. The way the ripples spread reminded me of everything: the laundromat, the coffee shop, the apartment. The late nights, the stolen touches, the tension that neither of us could escape. "You seem distant today," she said. Not accusatory, not teasing, just a quiet observation. I hesitated. I guess my voice faltered. I didn't finish. She looked at me then, really looked, as if peeling back layers I didn't know I had. "You're not yourself," she said softly. And I realized I hadn't been. Not entirely. A man passed by with a kid on his shoulders. I felt a strange twist in my chest. Jealousy. Maybe. Not of him, exactly, but of the ordinary things he had. The safety. The certainty. I started again, stepping closer, almost reaching for her hand. "I don't know why I keep thinking about you. About us." Her breath caught slightly. She didn't pull away, just let the words hang between us like smoke. I could see the hesitation, the flicker of guilt, maybe fear. I wanted to tell her it was okay, that I didn't expect answers. But I didn't. "I shouldn't," she whispered, eyes downcast. You're my friend's age." And her hand twitched, fingers brushing the hem of her sleeve. She stopped herself. I swallowed hard. "I don't care about that," I said quietly, but even as I said it, I felt the weight of it. And maybe she did too, because her gaze flitted away toward the fountain, toward the horizon. I wanted to reach for her, to touch her just once, to bridge the space that had grown too long between us. Instead, I stayed still, noticing the way her hair caught the fading light, the small crease between her brows when she considered saying something and didn't. "I can't," she murmured. And the words stopped, paused. "Whom?" We walked on in silence, side by side, the sound of our shoes against the path louder than anything else. Every step felt like a countdown. I imagined leaning close, just a fraction, feeling her exhale, feeling the tiny shift if she didn't stop me. But I didn't. Not yet. And then she stopped at the edge of the park, pulled her jacket tighter around her shoulders, looked at me. The question was there, unspoken, in her eyes. The one I wasn't sure I wanted the answer to. "Do we keep going?" I didn't answer. I just stared, feeling the quiet pull of everything we weren't supposed to, and maybe never could, say. She didn't reply that week. Not to texts, not to the note I left slipped under her door. The corner coffee shop felt empty without her presence. I kept looking for her at the usual table, tracing the curve of her mug in memory, but it wasn't enough. I tried calling once, twice. Nothing. My fingers hovered over the phone more than I wanted to admit, hovering, withdrawing, hovering again. I imagined a dozen reasons. Work, tiredness, guilt. But none sounded convincing. None stopped the tightening in my chest. Then I saw her from a distance. Across the park again, walking with someone else. Her laughter drifted faintly, lighter, warmer, directed at someone not me. A man, older than me, I realized, maybe around her age. My stomach twisted in a way that wasn't jealousy exactly. It was more like displacement. My presence evaporated, unnoticed. I waited a few days, then went back to the coffee shop, ordered the usual, sat at our table, hands wrapped around the mug as if heat could replace her. I watched the door swing open every time, heart skipping. And every time, it wasn't her. A week later, I noticed a note on her door, folded neatly, addressed to someone else. Not me. A child's name. My friend's kid. My mind raced, piecing it together too slowly. She wasn't just my friend's mom. She had her own world, her own obligations. And I had only glimpsed a sliver of it. I thought about calling her, texting, leaving another note. But what would I say? "I miss you" felt hollow in the face of reality. "I understand" sounded like surrender. Instead, I left the phone face down on the counter, unread messages lingering like shadows. I imagined her at home, folding laundry, stirring tea, thinking about me, and not thinking about me at all. I imagined conversations I'd never have, touches I'd never feel. Every scenario carried the same quiet ache, the sense that the story we'd started wasn't finished, but the words were slipping away. I saw her briefly, once more, from the coffee shop window. She caught my eye, just for a second. A flicker, a nod, not a smile, not a wave, just acknowledgement. And then she was gone again, swallowed by the city street. I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused, like life forgot to finish the sentence. The mug on the table cooled, condensation forming a tiny puddle. My fingers hovered over it before I finally set it down, dragging the edge across the counter in a line I would never erase. I imagined leaving a note, sending a text, knocking on her door. But I didn't. I walked away instead, back into the gray streets, hearing echoes of laughter that wasn't mine. The table stayed empty. The seat next to mine stayed empty. The story, our story, hovered in half-light, unfinished. And that was all there was for now. The rain was light, misting the street, when I found her on the doorstep. She wasn't expecting me. I could see that in the way she stiffened, hands gripping the railing, eyes flicking toward the wet sidewalk as if trying to decide if I belonged there at all. "I didn't think you'd come," she said, voice barely above the drizzle. "I wasn't sure if I should," I admitted. My jacket dripped on the porch, puddles forming at my shoes. I didn't move closer. Not yet. She tilted her head, just enough to let the rain hit the curve of her cheek. "I've been thinking." "Me too," I said, and it was the most honest thing I'd managed to get out in days. We stood there, quiet, the faint hum of the street lamps above, the smell of wet asphalt mingling with her perfume. I wanted to say everything, the notes, the coffee, the near moments in the park, but words tangled in my throat. So I let my gaze follow the way her fingers curled around the railing, the slight tremor that betrayed the calm she was trying to show. "I don't know if this is right," she said, voice low, almost confessional. "But I can't stop thinking about you." My heart stuttered, not with surprise. I'd been thinking about her every day, but with the weight of it being said aloud. The line had been crossed. Or maybe we'd crossed it ourselves months ago and only now had a name to put on it. "I don't know either," I said. My hands twitched. I wanted to reach for her. I wanted to take the risk, to bridge the distance. And yet, I hesitated, feeling every possibility of loss pressing down. My friend, her life, the fragility of what we'd built in stolen moments. She stepped closer, just a fraction, and the warmth hit me. Our shoulders brushed. It was not dramatic, not cinematic, but it was enough. "I don't want to hurt anyone," she whispered. "I don't either," I said. And then, just like that, the tension between risk and restraint eased slightly. Not completely gone, but softened by honesty. We stood on the porch, rain threading down our coats, just close enough to feel each other's presence. And then she did something small. Her hand brushed against mine. Light, almost accidental. I didn't pull away. Neither did she. And for a moment, that was enough. "Okay," she said softly. "Okay," I echoed. No grand gestures. No confessions of eternal love. Just a human connection that acknowledged what had been suppressed. The quiet vulnerability of being seen and choosing to stay, if only for a moment, together. The rain fell, the street hummed, and we didn't speak again. But we didn't move apart either. The rain was light, misting the street, when I found her on the doorstep. She wasn't expecting me. I could see that in the way she stiffened, hands gripping the railing, eyes flicking toward the wet sidewalk as if trying to decide if I belonged there at all. "I didn't think you'd come," she said, voice barely above the drizzle. "I wasn't sure if I should," I admitted. My jacket dripped on the porch, puddles forming at my shoes. I didn't move closer. Not yet. She tilted her head, just enough to let the rain hit the curve of her cheek. "I've been thinking." "Me too," I said, and it was the most honest thing I'd managed to get out in days. We stood there, quiet, the faint hum of the street lamps above, the smell of wet asphalt mingling with her perfume. I wanted to say everything, the notes, the coffee, the near moments in the park, but words tangled in my throat. So I let my gaze follow the way her fingers curled around the railing, the slight tremor that betrayed the calm she was trying to show. "I don't know if this is right," she said, voice low, almost confessional. But I can't stop thinking about you. My heart stuttered. Not with surprise. I had been thinking about her every day, but with the weight of it being said aloud. The line had been crossed. Or maybe we'd crossed it ourselves months ago and only now had a name to put on it. I don't know either, I said. My hands twitched. I wanted to reach for her. I wanted to take the risk to bridge the distance. And yet, I hesitated, feeling every possibility of loss pressing down. My friend, her life, the fragility of what we'd built in stolen moments. She stepped closer, just a fraction, and the warmth hit me. Our shoulders brushed. It was not dramatic, not cinematic, but it was enough. I don't want to hurt anyone, she whispered. I don't either, I said. And then, just like that, the tension between risk and restraint eased slightly. Not completely gone, but softened by honesty. We stood on the porch, rain threading down our coats, just close enough to feel each other's presence. And then she did something small. Her hand brushed against mine. Light, almost accidental. I didn't pull away. Neither did she. And for a moment, that was enough. Okay, she said softly. Okay, I echoed. No grand gestures. No confessions of eternal love. Just a human connection that acknowledged what had been suppressed, the quiet vulnerability of being seen and choosing to stay, if only for a moment, together. The rain fell, the street hummed, and we didn't speak again. But we didn't move apart either. Months passed. I stopped counting the days she didn't reply, stopped waiting for her in coffee shops, stopped rehearsing conversations that would never happen. Life moved in its small, stubborn rhythm. One morning, 8:47 a.m. I found her on the park bench, the same one where we had nearly crossed the line weeks ago. She held a steaming mug of black coffee, eyes on the rippling fountain. I sat down beside her, careful to leave space, careful to feel nothing more than the comfort of presence. Morning, she said, voice soft, almost shy. Morning, I said, and it felt like stepping into an old, familiar rhythm. Not flashy, not urgent, just us. We didn't speak for a while, just watched the water, the slow drift of leaves, the way the light hit her hair. I noticed the small habits I loved, the tilt of her head when she sipped her coffee, the quiet curl of her fingers around the mug. "See you next time," I asked, half joking, trying not to sound too eager. She smiled, a tiny, private smile. Maybe. We walked slowly afterward, the park empty except for the occasional jogger and dog. No grand gestures, no confessions, just side-by-side presence, footsteps in sync, small silences that carried weight because they were chosen, not forced. Sometimes we returned to the apartment above my friends. Sometimes to the coffee shop where she'd once waited for me. The routines shifted, but our quiet familiarity remained. We learned the rhythm of each other again, slower this time, with space for mistakes and laughter. She told me about her child occasionally, offhand, in stories that didn't require me to ask. I shared pieces of my world she hadn't known before. The balance was fragile, yes, but we understood it. We were careful because that was part of what made being together feel possible. One afternoon, I caught her watching me stir my black coffee, fingers tracing the mug absent-mindedly, the same way she had months ago in the laundromat. I realized she was still noticing me, still remembering the tiny details that made the rest of the world feel too large. And I understood that we were here not because of dramatic declarations or confessions shouted in the rain or near misses in parks. We were here because we had survived our own hesitations, our own rules, our own fears. Life wasn't perfect. There were still quiet pangs of guilt, of uncertainty. But there was also warmth, earned, gentle, patient. She leaned back on the bench, fingers brushing against mine. I let them rest there, simple, human, enough. I watched her take a sip of coffee and smiled faintly. No words, no need. She knew. And in that small, ordinary moment, I understood something I hadn't before. Sometimes love isn't fireworks or finales. Sometimes it's noticing the crease in her sleeve, the way she folds the napkin, the way she waits for you at 8:47 a.m. quietly without expectation. I didn't need to say anything. She didn't need to. We simply were. And that was enough.